There was nothing special about me when I go through grief. Everybody goes through it. We just don't talk about it enough. And because we don't talk about it enough, we feel it's just us, but it's not. It's not. And we need to actually share these tools that we use in order to get through it so that we can indeed get through it.
You're listening to Guards Down. This is Greg Washington.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Guards Down. I have with me a lady, Miss June Copeland. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I cannot complain at all. So, of course, we're talking about PTSD and complicated grief and how different cultures view it, treat it, and overcome it. And, like I was telling you earlier, I look at trauma and grief, not just in the moment, but over the course of your life. I feel like trauma and grief shapes the person you become, shapes what you go through and how you endure it, as well as how you transition throughout those different stages of life. And so, I just want to start by just telling us about yourself.
Okay. My name is June Copeland, as was mentioned already. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the military. I made the 06 list some months ago, and I'm just waiting to get to actually pin on. So I'm pretty excited about that. But as with everything, there's a tale with that too. So I have 3 children. All 3 of them either attended or are currently attending West Point. I'm a West Point graduate. And again, I agree with you that PTSD, trauma shapes who we are, determines how we need to go through it. My mother used to always say that it's not what you go through, it's how you go through it. And what she meant by that is that no matter what happens to you, it's really up to you as an individual to determine how you're going to plow through it and get to the other end. And so again, PTSD is a trauma that happens to you. It can happen to you. Most people associate it with just being in the military. I don't, much like yourself. I believe it happens in every facet of life. And I signed up for this because I've had my own share of trauma, both professionally and personally, and had to deal with grief. And again, the grief didn't come as a result of me being in the military. It came from my own personal life. And so I am interested in this topic. I'm interested in how people recover from it. I'm just interested in it all the way around because I believe, as my mother did say, it's not what you go through, it's how you go through it. And this is a stigmatized topic. Oftentimes people don't want to talk about it and they're ashamed of it when they have to go through it. But I believe if we have more voices towards this, that people will realize that they're not alone when it comes to trauma and that there is light on the other end of the tunnel.
I hear that. All right. Well, look, it sounds like Mama and Grandma shared some good words of wisdom. It's how you go through, not what you go through. And so I really,
right.
So, just to kind of start off, did your parents or your family members or the people around you teach you how to deal with grief growing up and trauma?
So I can say yes and no. And so I despise when people say it's a yes and no question because it's either off or on. But in this scenario, it is. My dad had no real way of knowing how to discipline children. So he was harsher than the average parent, which brought about a certain amount of stress, trauma, and grief. But never did anybody sit down with me and tell me how to manage that from a young girl's point of view. And nor did they tell me or did understand how that would affect me later on in life, actually. So again, what my mother would tell me is life is hard. Life is extremely hard. And you've got to go through it with discipline. You've got to go through it with a good work ethic. You've got to go through it with certain tools that get you through the tough times, foresight, focus. These are the things that you use in order to develop a plan and then employ that plan so that you can actually get to the other side of grief. But what I find now that I'm at a certain age and have gotten through a certain amount of experiences, what I found is that what was lacking, and this is across the board because my cousins and I, we were from the same, I'll say, cohort, but in reality, we were all born within a 5-year period of time. And so there's about 15 of us, again, born through that time, and we're now seasoned. I'll call us that. We're now seasoned, and we've all shared our share of life events that are, some would classify them as traumatic. And so what I found is that as I look at everyone's situations and help them or walk them through life and walk through life myself, what was missing from our training, from our development, is being forgiving and caring for ourselves during times of grief, trauma, and any type of negativity that happens in life. As a culture, I believe that we don't teach us to be loving and caring as we get through. And so I found that now when I go through grief, or if I go through a traumatic event, the first thing I need to do is treat myself like I would treat my children, with love and compassion and understanding. I treat myself like I would treat a soldier that's going through something tough. I would give them a shoulder to cry on, someone to lean on, and I would expect for them to do the same thing. And I do what I expect. I do what I do for other people. But I realized that the first so many years, I wasn't very forgiving with myself when it came to that. I wasn't very loving and compassionate. I was ashamed, and I almost mentally beat myself down saying, how could I let this happen? Or, why couldn't I do better? Or I start self-blaming. And these are the things that I think my parents' generation could have taught us better. If they were even given that, generationally speaking, they were in a particular situation where when they walked out of their front door, the laws of the nation were against them. They weren't treated as human beings. And so because they weren't treated as human beings, it's very hard to turn them around and then speak to your children about being loving and compassionate and understanding when it comes to encountering life problems. So I think we're learning over a generation. I've actually taught my children, again, you've got to forgive yourself, love yourself. Be caring towards yourself when you go through the inevitable, the problem, the trauma, the grief.
Mm-hmm. No, I like how you initially addressed that and saying that you have to treat yourself the way you would, of course, treat others. And that's with being, forgiving and caring. I think that that's a very important aspect to dealing with it that a lot of us tend to inherently overlook.
Yes.
So tell me this. Tell us more about your culture and background as far as, religion, what you identify as, that whole nine.
Okay. So I probably should have went into this when you asked me to introduce myself earlier, but I jumped right into the topic. So I consider myself an African-American female. I was born in Savannah, Georgia. Because of the Southern culture at the time, they had really only started desegregating schools and businesses about 5 years before I was born, which most people don't even think of the impacts of that. But my mom realized early on that there's no way she wanted us to be raised in that type of a school environment. And so because there were opportunities available in Michigan, she moved us to Detroit, Michigan. And so we were raised in Detroit, Michigan. However, Detroit had its own reputation. And because it had its own reputation, my mom had to work to put us through. My mom and dad both had to work to put us in private school. And so from the 1st to the 8th grade, we went to private school. From there, I went to a magnet school. And from there, my twin brother got a hold of me in our senior year and said, hey, why don't we join the military? We've never been separated before in life, so I'm not interested in doing that right now. Are you? I kind of didn't want to do that either, so I enlisted in the Army with him, thinking it was going to be a couple years, and here I am 20 years later still doing the same thing. So that's where I'm at. That's who I am as an individual pretty much. Culturally, I identify, again, African American, Black, to me, those are synonymous. Some people may say that they're not, but they are to me. I love my culture. I love my people. But then again, I love all people, and that feeds right into my faith. So I identify as Christian. I thought I had a very good understanding of what my faith meant for me as an individual, but I had a peripheral understanding of what faith was really about. When the Bible says walk by faith, not by sight, a lot of things that you see aren't what they appear to be. And so you have to have a good relationship, to me, with God in order to walk confidently through the landmines that you do and don't see. And so it wasn't until about 2006 that I actually began this Bible study, which literally taught me how to understand the Bible, understand my faith, understand the direction that I wanted for my life, and helped me to see a lot of things that I hadn't seen prior to that. So the most important thing, if my children were standing in front of you and anyone asked them what my most important relationship is, by far, hands down, they would tell you my faith, my relationship with God. And then comes my relationship with them, because I found that once I focus on that important relationship, everything else around me falls into place. That's been my experience. And I actually put it to task.
I got you. And so before we get into one of the next questions, did you notice that there was a difference from the South versus living in the North?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I said, did you notice if there was a difference living in the South versus living in the North?
Yes. And so remember my cohort group of cousins? So I can have them as a comparison other. I can use them as a comparison other. All of us went to college in one way, shape, or form, depending on where we went. That's the only difference. But a lot of the things were different culturally. We're different as far as what we believe our authority is in this space. And I'll use this as an example. I have a cousin. She was my favorite cousin growing up. And we have talked since we became adults. Something about how she was trained, I'll say, in Georgia, created a subordinate nature in her mind, meaning that she approached life in a subordinate fashion. For me, up north, it wasn't like that. We felt that we were in control of our own area. We owned our own space. It was different. There was a different type of racism. There was a phrase that said, in the South, they cared about how high you got. They didn't care about how close you got. They cared about how high you got. However, in the North, they didn't care how high you got, but they didn't want you close. And so I guess based on that, I've grown to know what that meant. Up north, no one had a problem with me being educated. No one had a problem with me striving for better opportunities for myself. No one had a problem with me excelling in school. But I remember where my cousin in different scenarios would keep felt as though perceived that she was being held back. And a lot of times things that she was going through, I didn't experience. However, there were distinct instances of racism going on in Michigan. However, that didn't keep me from pushing through, getting my A, getting accepted to different programs that wouldn't ordinarily be open to certain individuals. It didn't stop me from doing all of that. So yeah, I did notice there was a difference. I noticed that when I even went to visit, there was a different type of treatment when I went to visit my relatives in Georgia as opposed to in the North. And also having graduated and became an officer in the military, what I actually noticed was that in the southern states that I was stationed at, there was a distinct difference in treatment of me when I was in uniform versus when I was not, meaning that I encountered scenarios where if they didn't know I was in the military, they treated me as if I was literally stupid without even allowing for a conversation or allowing me to demonstrate my character as opposed to just assuming. And so I ran into a lot more of that in southern states than I did in northern states. So throughout my life, there have been distinct differences from depending on location of how we were treated.
Gotcha. And so with those, distinct differences, do you feel like there's a cultural difference in how people cope?
Yes, I do. And I even say that there's a difference in how we cope as genders. There's a difference in how Blacks cope as opposed to how whites cope. Difference in how Asians cope. What I found over my experience, and I can only speak for my own experience, what I found is that it is more acceptable for whites to have traumatic experiences, and it seems like the world falls in around them to help them through the issue. I've noticed that with Asians, and this is the only other group that I've been exposed to, Asians have a tendency to quiet themselves and just fight through the issue. They don't speak out much about it. They just go through it silently. I can honestly say that there's been situations in that cultural group where I've struggled immensely trying to get them to explain the trauma and feel okay and feel safe, understanding that it was a traumatic experience. I don't know if I explained that very well.
No, I get it. So,
okay.
In Asian, from an Asian standpoint of just internalizing it and keeping it in and not expressing.
Yeah, this honorable thing to put information out there like that. And it's hard to explain to them that they have all these different resources available to them as it pertains to dealing with the trauma, because again, it's a cultural thing that it's dishonorable to speak ill of your family or speak ill of your situation. It's an honorable thing to muscle through it. And so similar to that, and I don't know, it's not a thing of honor, but I don't know whether it's in the Black culture, in my culture, and then I'll speak for Blacks in general. Blacks are not encouraged to talk about trauma. From the time we're children, we're told, hey, I'll give you something to cry about. The funniest thing was, and I know everyone's experienced this, I don't know if the recent generation has, but I know my generation and back, all of us have experienced this. After you get a spanking, fix your face. So we have to quickly turn off that emotion. We have to quickly turn off that hurt or suffer the consequences. And so I think based on that, because I've lived through that, countless times I've lived through that. And what it taught me was that the world wasn't going to be compassionate on my broken heart, that the world was not going to cater to me, hold and coddle me when I had trauma or when I suffered through something, that in some way, shape, or form, it was my fault. And I had to figure out a way how not to do that again. And that mentality I can see through many times in my life where I kept that and I just dealt with it. But then in dealing with it, I didn't deal with it from a healthy point of view. And I struggled with how I manhandled myself or roughly dealt with myself in dealing with my own traumas. And so as a Black female, to dissect it, deconstruct it down even further, as a Black female, I find that we are always told to be stronger than any other group, to the point where there are times I could share some tear-jerking tragedies that's happened in my life, and pretty much it's not even no one breaks stride. The culture, the environment says, hey, what else can you produce for me? What else? Oh, yeah, I understand that happened to you, but what else can we do? And I can give a good example of that. I lost one of the most important people in my life in the last year. And I had this mission to do. And the mission entailed 330 some odd thousand soldiers that had to get this information. But we were at a cross in the road that if I didn't do a certain thing, then that would detrimentally impact 330,000 soldiers. So within days, less than a week of me losing the date, I had to be on stage in front of 600 GOs and their sergeant majors explaining the situation to them. And what I got was, great job. I'm glad you're able to do this. But nothing saying, hey, are you okay? And so the mission was to do something. The actual mission was to head from the moment I lost her to March, to the very end of March, which recently, the March that just passed. And we were supposed to complete a mission that had never been done before in Department of Defense history. With me and a few others, and just a few others leading the charge. We got the mission done. We ended it up in the first 2 weeks of COVID, and the mission was done to success, to which, after it was complete, we were the #1 story in the Pentagon News because of it. However, not at one point in time did anyone in my leadership say, hey, June, are you okay? Are you okay? And for me, because I've been trained and I know that it wasn't okay. I know that the inability of a leader to even ask how you are doing, there's something wrong with that. I would never be that type of leader. But I realized that I couldn't put my own personal trauma aside, because I've had to think about this for quite some time. I couldn't put my own personal trauma aside for the sake of my mission, or I had to put my own personal trauma aside for the sake of the mission. And so that was a choice that I had to do. But again, it took, and I often wondered, how is it possible for me to do this? And it was possible because I've been conditioned my whole life to put my trauma aside and deal with whatever needs to be dealt with. And to me, whereas I respect myself because I was able to get it done, and I am sure that 335,000 plus soldiers respected the fact that I got it done, and that there's a grateful nation out there that don't even realize that what I had to give up in order to do it. But I am aware, keenly aware, that if the situation was given, or the situation happened to someone else, that the world would fall in around them and help them more through the trauma.
Can you explain the situation?
What do you mean?
What you were dealing with personally versus your mission?
That'll bring about a certain amount of emotion, but if you don't mind that, I will go ahead and explain, because again, people don't, I think one of the purposes behind people going through trauma is the ability to share it with other people so that they know that they're not alone when they go through it, and they realize, one, that they're not alone, and two, that they can get through it. Or three, that something went wrong with how they went through it, and I can learn how to do it better. So if you are okay with a certain amount of emotion, then sure, I can explain it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'll be right here with you.
Okay, so Christmas Day, I lost my mom. And that was traumatic in and of itself. And I will give a story, and I'll use this quick story just to explain who she was and how she was. So remember, my twin brother wanted me to join the Army because he had never been separated from me before. Mm-hmm. Well, I did not understand what being in the Army meant. I thought the entire Army was located at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and that it was kind of like the TV show Gomer Pyle. And so I thought that I would be able to see my brother all the time. It would be entertaining like the shows on MASH. That's what I actually thought. And by the time I was there about 4 weeks, I realized I'd made a grave mistake, that this was not what I thought it would be, and I was not cut out for it. And so I snuck out the barracks. It was a Wednesday evening. I snuck out the barracks with a pocket full of change and low-crawled myself to the toll booths so I could call my mom. And the moment I heard her voice, it was the first time I'd heard her voice in 4 weeks. I heard her voice, and it just, every child cell in my body just reacted, and I just cried. And she thought something was wrong with me. So she panicked, and she said, "Baby, are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, Mama, I'm okay." She said, "Did anybody bother you?" I said, No. And she said, "So you just want to talk to me?" And I said, "Yeah." And so she said, "Well, cry it out." and I'll be here through your tears. I'll be here. And she said that, just talk to me when you're ready. And so I just kept putting quarters into the machine, into the phone, and I just kept talking to her, or I kept crying until I was able to talk. And so she said, what's wrong? And I said, Mama, I'm not cut out for this. This is not what I was supposed to do. And I said, I have no idea. They're trying to get me to go to Germany after this. And I had no intention on leaving Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So I don't know why they're trying to send me someplace else. I can't do this. I said, they really want me to be a real adult, and I'm not a real adult. And she said, baby, you are a real adult. And she said, you can do this. She said, and I said, no, Mama, I can't. And she said, she said, can you hold on till Saturday? And I said, well, sure, I can hold on till Saturday. She said, we'll talk again on Saturday, and then you can walk me through how you're feeling and what you're thinking. And I said, fine. So I was on cloud nine because I was going to talk to Mama, and she was going to sign off on me quitting, and I'd be able to go on back home and go to college like I had planned to. And so I went back and did my stuff, and Saturday came, and that afternoon I was a squad leader, and I walked into our company area leading a squad, and I saw all these colors, and in the stands was my mom. In the bleachers was my mom and my dad and my brother and my grandmother and my aunt. Suffice it to say, there were about 12 people, 12 of my relatives right there in the stands. And I just busted out crying. And my drill sergeant said, hey, are those people bothering you? And I was like, no, drill sergeant. He said, you want to go talk to those people? And I said, yeah. I raced over. He took my weapon after he dropped me for 20 push-ups. He took my weapon, and I ran over to my mom and just held her. And so she said, here's the deal. After we, all talked and got reacquainted and whatnot, she said, here's the deal. She said, I cannot fly all these people. And they were there from Florida, Georgia, Michigan, South Carolina. They were all from all over the place. And she personally got them there to that location. And she said, I can't possibly do this every week. She said, but she said, I promise you that if you can make it week after week, I will be here every Sunday. And I had about 6 more weeks left for basic training, and my mother was there every week. She drove from Michigan to South Carolina every week to encourage me to do this military thing. And so that's one of my favorite stories about my mom. But if I have that story, I've got dozens and dozens and dozens from the time I can remember. She put her heart into raising her children. She suffered a certain amount of trauma herself. She had a horrible childhood. And when she had children, she decided that she would drop everything to raise them and to love them. And she loved us with her whole heart. And I lost her. I lost that person. And it hurt. It hurt like, so I didn't understand grief until I lost her. Your body feels broken. Your mind feels broken. Your heart is broken. And most people don't understand what that means. They think grief is just a sadness, and it's far more than that. There are certain things that happen to you emotionally and psychologically and physically. The chemical reaction of your body literally changes, and your body has to go through all of that in order to just function. When you deal with real grief, it's hard to function even. And so the last thing my mom told me on December 15th, I had no idea. She called me and I was TDY someplace. And she said, I just want to hear your voice. And I said, well, Mom, I'm about to walk into a meeting. And she said, baby, do your job. That's the last thing she told me. Baby, well, other than I love you, because she never ended a conversation with bye. She always said, I love you. And so the second to last thing my mom told me was, baby, do your job. And so I have made that woman proud of me by doing my job for 20 years. I wasn't always certain what I needed to do, but I knew I could bring her honor and pride by doing my job and doing it well. And so I've put myself, my whole heart into everything that I've done for a host of reasons, but she's always been my number one reason. And to lose her, and then have to turn around. So I'm fielding this system. So that's the personal aspect of it. And so professionally, my job is I am the lead for this project called IPSE, and it is the Integrated Pay and Personnel System. Billions of dollars have been funneled into this project, but it wasn't until recently that they put the right people in place in order to actually make it work. So they've been doing this project maybe for 14 or 15 years. And again, billions, to the point where Congress now manages this program as personally as Congress can manage it. So we have a congressional mandate to meet certain benchmarks of this program. We also have a congressional mandate to finish this program and field it to all three components of the Army. The first component is the National Guard, and it's the most complex component because it's comprised of all the states and territories in the nation. So 54 different, what they call mini armies. So 54 different systems, hundreds of systems, and the systems that go into them, that feed into them and feed out of them. So those systems had to come under this one personnel system that we had to do. And again, it has been attempted for well over a decade plus, but now we're under congressional mandate to actually get it done. And the completion date was 24 March 2020. We were about 16 states in, with a completion date of 50, with a completion number of 54. We had to complete 54. And so when I lost my mom, that was the mission, to finish fielding those to each state, to finish fielding the system to each state. And mind you, any failure to field the system properly, and there are hundreds of steps to fielding it and distributing it and making sure that the thousands and thousands of people that actually were a part of the system were actually brought over. It's their whole personnel record. It's everything. And it's more than just a G1 human resources system. It's a system that manages every aspect of the soldier, from their deployments to everything. And so to build it and then to deploy it, again, like I said, it was history in the making, really. But there was one lead for the National Guard, and that was me. And so what they gave me was a team that wasn't very senior. So we had a very small team. And again, when it came to leadership, I was the only field grade. Oh no, there was one other field grade officer, but I was the colonel, and that other field grade officer hadn't been there but 3 or 4 months. So when it came to talking to generals across the nation, when it came to talking to chiefs of staffs throughout the nation, every division commander, talking to FORSCOM and HRC and HQDA, the rooms in the Pentagon, when it came talking to them, there was one person that had the voice of the National Guard, and then one person that had to take that information and convey it to all those entities so that we could actually pull the system off. I couldn't fail.
You read, huh?
And so
much pressure on you.
Yes. And so much pressure. But what Mama said was, do your job. And that was my job. That was the mission. That was the job. And so I didn't feel, not that I couldn't, my class motto is duty will not wait. Duty doesn't wait for any of us. And there are some people that sacrifice little. There's some people that sacrifice everything. You know that as well as I do. And so I lost the most influential person in my life, but I still had a sound mind, and I still had a body strong enough to do the task. And so for me, and I had hundreds of thousands of people depending on me. And so the choice was simple, but the execution of the task was harder, much harder. And so what did it take to get up every single day? As I mentioned, when you go through grief and trauma, there's a physical toll that it takes on you. It's hard to focus. It's hard to concentrate. It's hard to get motivated because what I've learned is that your dopamine and there's another feel-good chemical that's released in your body naturally that when you hit trauma, it automatically decreases. And so I didn't know what it was that made me not feel like getting up and getting going. And so I Googled once, I don't want to get out of bed. And I would hate to tell you what came up in my Google search. I guess there's some people that Google that have no good intentions. And so there's that. So it just took a lot to fight through what I had to do every single day just to make the mission happen. History has said that the 54 states are in the books. The mission happened as it was supposed to. Days after losing my mom, I had to go to a place in Arkansas where 600 general officers and sergeant majors were standing, the TRADOC commander, the FORSCOM commander, they were all sitting there in the audience. And up until 2 hours before the meeting, my mind could not even focus on the brief that I needed to give. But minutes before my brief, I had one of these leaders that said, "Hey, you're good for the brief, right?" Fine time for you to ask. But that goes back to my absolute dependency on my faith and my walk with God. Because in that moment, I knew that God would give me the words to say what I needed to say. And he would give me the strength to stand in front of the audience, because even up until that point, when I lost my mom, I was not even certain I had a desire. Everything about me did this job to make her proud. And with her not there, I wasn't even certain I wanted to do the job anymore. I wasn't even certain that I could do the job anymore. And so I stood in front of that audience. This was my first big thing since losing my mom. And I actually talked to it and I spoke about it. And it freed me a little bit. And again, people say I need to actually watch the video, but I've never looked at it again, because I looked at them and I was just very transparent. And I said, very rarely do I talk about my West Point experience, because as you know, sometimes you get a negative backlash, mm-hmm. Oh, she thinks she's all that, or you get that backlash, or people begin to do this idolization of you because you went to West Point. And again, I didn't want all of that. I've always wanted just content of character. Who do you think I am? And you deal with me accordingly. But case in point, I was in command for 8 months, and they didn't know that I was a West Point graduate, because I needed them to follow me because of what I was doing, not because of what institution they had thoughts and stuff about. But I opened that brief in front of those 600 people, 622 to be exact, by saying, I'm a West Point graduate, and my daughters are all currently at West Point. And they actually all began applauding. And so I was looking around the room. I found, here's another thing that happens when you undergo grief. You get very short-tempered. Oh my goodness. I was irritated that they were clapping, because I didn't anticipate that when I was going through this rehearsal in my head. And so I looked out and I looked around the room and I said, well, my reaction probably I shouldn't say what I'm actually thinking. So I said, wow, I didn't anticipate, a round of applause for that. I said, but I bring that up not to be braggadocious, not to have you applaud for me. I bring it up because the reason I'm a West Point graduate, and the reason my 3 children were inspired to be West Point graduates and leaders of character, is because of the work of my mom, June Copeland. And I stand before you today saying that I just lost her a few days ago. Everything that I am, everything that I've always strove to be, was a result of her sacrifice, her love, her commitment, and her unconditional support. And I said, so a lot of you are thinking probably, why the heck is she here? Why is she here? Why would she have that situation happen and then turn around and be here giving this brief? And my point to them is because it's that important. Because it's that important. There was nobody else that could have given you guys this brief, and there was no one else that could have held this platform, understanding what we've done up until this point, and tell you the importance of what you need to do as leadership teams in your states and territories for the next 3 months in order for us to get this done. And so based off of that, the room took on this whole different energy. And because it took on the energy, we were able to feel the system all across the board to everyone. And it was brutal. It was literally brutal. There's no other way to say it. But again, I've been trained to suffocate trauma at the sake of getting the mission accomplished. And so I can honestly tell you that when the day rolled around, the 24th, I felt dead inside. I knew what we had accomplished, and I even got an email from the G1 of the Army saying, great job. If it weren't for you, this wouldn't get done. You know, I'm so proud of you. But nothing meant anything because I felt so dead inside. And it took a while. It took a few months after that, a few weeks after that, for me to even start to feel again, because another consequence of trauma and grief is that the things you find joy in, there's a certain amount of anxiety, depression, and a loss in joy of things that you found tremendous joy in before. So I hope that answered everything that you...
You did. You unpacked so much. And I got so many questions. And I'm just like, okay, I want to talk about this, ask that. First, let me say that is an amazing story about your mom and the lengths that she went to support you. And just to let you know that where you come from, that, you know, you got a family that cares. And I mean, that's beautiful. And not everybody has that. And so
True.
To be able to have those moments with her and share, you know, those are memories that can't nobody take away from you.
True.
You know? Okay, so the part that I want to talk about now, and you were starting to, you know, to speak on them, what are some tools and techniques that you use to cope? Unhealthy and healthy. And I say unhealthy and healthy because, you know, given the fact that we, what we didn't learn, we had to teach ourselves. And
yes.
So once you learn something and you figure out that might not be the best thing, you tweak it and, you know, to get better.
So that's a really good question. So unhealthy and healthy. I'll tackle unhealthy first. 4. So the number one was emotional eating. I eat when I'm emotional. And so that was the number one unhealthy thing that I did to cope. And I'm still working through that right now. The second thing I did was, and this was something that I didn't understand, binge watch television. And so I didn't understand this, but a very, very, he's like my brother, wise man said, because I couldn't understand it. I said, I'm doing the darndest things. I will kill an entire series in a weekend. Because I couldn't sleep. And so I was wondering how that was possible because I never have been a television watching type of a person. And he said, your brain needs something to focus on. Your brain needs something like mindless drama to focus on, to take your mind away from. It's a very easy way to take your mind away from focusing on everything that you have to focus on. It pulls your mind into their lives and you're just a spectator, and your brain relaxes because all it's doing is watching someone else's life and getting involved in their life. So that was another thing that I thought was unhealthy because I was losing an inordinate amount of time watching television, and I'm just generally not that way. I get 100 things done in a day, and to just waste that much time watching TV was one thing. because I was hurting, another unhealthy thing I did was I just didn't take care of myself very well. And that was against everything my mom has always taught me to do. And maybe that was part of what I call the fourth thing, which I didn't do it to an extreme, but it was punishing myself for even going through this. Because again, going right back, and I'm not even sure about this, I'm unpacking this right here in front of you. When I was a kid, everything that I went through was in one way, shape, or form my fault. My parents never, disciplined me because I didn't do something wrong. It was because I did do something wrong. And so in this scenario, I subconsciously went back to punishing myself for a wrong that I subconsciously thought I had done, which warranted this pain that I was in. I'm unpacking this right in front of you right now. And so as a result, I had to do healthier things. And so what are some of those things? I had to realize that my grief was a journey. And I didn't learn that all by myself. I had an amazing man that I actually have known since I was in my first years at West Point, that we had fallen out of touch. And just recently at the reunion, we got back in touch. But little did I know he would be responsible for helping me through this journey. He lost his own mother. And so he explained that this whole thing was a journey and that we all go through it in our own way. Understanding was a journey. I began to let off of myself, of being so hard on myself about why can't I fix things right now? Why can't I? And that's what, unpacking right here and there. That's what I was angry with myself about. That's what I was blaming myself for. I felt that I should be, because I'm high functioning, because I'm intelligent, I should be able to fix this grief issue or fix this problem that I was going through just by logic alone. And I was angry with myself because I was failing to do it. So another thing that I did was I want to say I surrounded myself with people that loved me, but that's not how that went. I had people that loved me, but they didn't know what to do or say, because what do you say to a person who lost that? And so I would tell people, if you have it, if you're surrounded by it, look for people to surround yourself with, healthy people that understand loss, that understand you, that can support you through it. In my scenario, unfortunately, I only had one person, the man, that helped me through the entire ordeal. I'll call it that. I found myself dealing with anger issues, dealing with just resentment, dealing with frustration and pain. I went through a period of time where it was just nothing but rage. But in addition to that, I had to do my job too. And I realized, one of the things I realized in talking to my friend is that what I was going through, I had to accept how I was feeling this grief. I had to accept the rage, not feed into it, but accept that it was happening, and then find solutions. That's one of the things that I actually believe helped me out the most. It's not ridiculous optimism. It is making a conscious choice, going right back to what my mother said. It's not what you go through, it's how you go through it. And the how was, you have to sit down and figure out the problem in its entirety. You have to figure out, where is it that I want to be when this journey, quote unquote, is done? I want it to be healthy. I want it to be happy. I want it to be loving, because losing my mom made me very angry. And I didn't want to be scarred by anger. I didn't want to be a bitter person. I didn't want the experience to turn me into a bitter person. I wanted to be a loving and caring person, even after this trauma. I want to be healthy. So I didn't want my overeating to make me an unhealthy person. There's a whole lot of things that I looked at and said, this is what I want to be when this journey is over. And then once I did that, I actually began developing plans. So for example, if I wanted to be a loving person, this is going to be a little bit more difficult to explain. When I felt rage, I had to mentally unpack that. I had to accept that I was feeling that and then go into my own mind and figure out, why am I feeling rage? I felt rage. And one of the things that I came up with is that I felt rage because I lost my mom, and secretly I thought she was better than other people's moms. So why couldn't they lose mine? Why did I have to lose mine? Irrational. I remember growing up, my mom, there was a situation and she said, well, baby, why is it fair for that to happen to them and not to you? And I said, well, I just don't want it to happen to me. She said, it's no more fair for something bad to happen to them than it would be for it to happen to you. And so you have to accept that sometimes bad things happen to everybody, and you have to figure out how to deal with that. And so I was angry because of that. And then I just had to remember those words and remember that it's unfair. I'd be ashamed if someone knew that I was sitting around resenting them for having their mothers. When, as you mentioned earlier, Greg, not many people had the stories that I have with mine. I had to learn to be grateful for the time that I did have. I had to learn to be appreciative of the love that I experienced with her. I had to get all of that. And once you remind yourself of that, and once you keep it in the forefront of your mind, I got this thing called the Grateful app. And I start writing down memories of hers that made me grateful that I was her child, made me grateful for the life lessons that she taught. I began to share her story with other people, because in that way, that kept her spirit alive and that kept her memory alive. And so I began to do that. I began to look at everything I want to be when this journey was over, and I had to build a plan for it. I'm a West Point graduate. That's what we do. We develop plans. And so I developed a plan for every single thing that I wanted to be. Healthy, I had to stop overeating because that wasn't going to help me. I had to cut out the sugar and develop a workout routine where I actually started to go and work out. Not just think about it, but I actually had to go. It was all of those things. And then cut out the addictive behavior and look for my new normal. Accept that I was never going to be the way I was before, and to work towards it. And so I think I laid out everything that I've had to do in order to get to a point where I can smile. I can bless other people with information. I can be a blessing to other people. I can share my story so that other people can get strength from it. And truth be told, those steps have made all the difference in the world. I'm stronger than I ever thought I ever would be. And I'm positive. I am today what I never thought I could be on Christmas Day.
No, that is amazing for you to well, one, just to make it through all of that, because I can only imagine what you were dealing with internally.
Yes.
From the 4 healthy ones, the emotional eating, the binge watching, just to, to mindlessly keep your things off of, of what you were dealing with. And then, didn't taking care of yourself and punishing yourself. We're our own worst critics.
Yes.
And so all of that is very, I won't say common, but it is something that we do.
Yes.
It's kind of like you almost have to wear your badge of grief and hurt.
Yeah.
And so and it's like, if you don't, then you get what I'm saying?
I do, because at first I felt guilty about taking off my badge of guilt and hurt. But here's the truth. I didn't need it. I found I've been blessed beyond measure. I really have been. I'm the little Black girl from Detroit, Michigan, that was raised in the ghetto, and I have an amazing life. I've been divorced twice, yet and still I was able to raise my daughters pretty much all by myself. And one just graduated from West Point a month ago, and the other 2 are cows now. And so I've been blessed beyond measure. A strange thing to me, once you change your own energy, things like that change for you. So someone decided to do a little piece on me and my daughter, and it's become the most, the highest engaged Facebook post in Army history. Just strange. So these occurrences are happening, and it's all because of a change of mindset. Change of mindset, change of heart, being able to see the end and get to the end without, as you said, I didn't take anything away from when you said it's all pretty common. You weren't saying that my situation was common. What you're saying is that everybody experiences it. There was nothing special about me when I go through grief. Everybody goes through it. We just don't talk about it enough. And because we don't talk about it enough, we feel it's just us, but it's not. It's not. And we need to actually share these tools that we use in order to get through it so that we can indeed get through it.
You took the words out of my mouth. That was exactly. So I appreciate. I love the way you said that better than than the thought in my head. And so with that, two things that you really spoke on. One was understanding that your healing was a journey.
Yes.
And so to be able to, all right, say, okay, I know I'm about to be on this long path. This is what I want to look like on the other end of it. Mm-hmm. That in itself was very powerful. You wanted to define who you were going to be after this.
Yes.
And I think more importantly than anything else that's the core, to getting through it. And so that was deep. And I just wanted to point that out because for anyone that's out there that might be going through it, to be able to have that foresight to say, okay, this is who I want to be. I'm not going to let this eat away at me and take the person that I am, that I'm going to make it out and become better.
Yes.
So good. The other one you spoke of an app. You said the Grateful app. And so with the Grateful app, because this was the second point, you said you wanted to do things to keep her spirit alive. And so that's beautiful. I always tell myself a person dies twice. Once in physical form and the last time their name is spoken.
Yes.
And so when you spoke about that and just being able to share your love with her and that experience, that's amazing. And that's a way for us to honor her, to live on. So I appreciate you just sharing, because that touched me, that blessed me. So thank you.
I have to thank her. You're very welcome, though.
Okay. Well, let's talk about signs of dealing with complicated grief and PTSD. So what were some feelings, thoughts, actions that signified that made you know that you were dealing with trauma and grief?
Lethargy was the one that I found most surprising. I just did not feel like doing anything other than work and doing what I need to do for my kids. I didn't push myself to do much of anything else, not talk to friends, not go socialize, nothing. So that was the biggest thing. The lack of desire of wanting to do anything that I'm an extrovert by nature. And the fact that I did not want to interact with people was a shocking thing for me. The fact that I had no feeling, again, did something that no one's ever done in DoD history. And I was one of the leads for that. And it meant nothing. I was the number one story in the Pentagon News. And I just looked at it and just moved on. The day came and I knew we were going to do it. And it just didn't move me. COVID came and I was like, okay, got to go get toilet paper. I mean, that was my reaction to most things. And here's the thing I found out about most people, which only exacerbated the resentment that I was having. No one noticed. No one noticed. I'd say my friend noticed, and nobody noticed other than that. No one really noticed the hurt that was going on. Mm-hmm. It was like, boy, we sure are glad that you're on board. And I would just tell them I don't feel like interacting. I don't feel like doing this. I don't feel like going out for social hour. I don't feel like talking to you on the phone. I don't feel. And that was part of the thing that surprised me. So my best girlfriend, so the man is my best friend, but he's my best friend overall. But I have a best girlfriend too. She didn't know what to say. I've always been like her big sister, so she didn't really know what to say to me. So she would try to do things, and we would go out. We did the twerk out, twerking through a workout. Uh-huh. And whereas that should be very entertaining, and you should be, fixing your skills and stuff, I didn't feel anything. It was just something to do. Whereas before I would have a blast doing something like that. And so I was conscious that something was different. I was conscious that, and it actually frightened me too, because I was hoping that I wouldn't indefinitely have this dead feeling inside. Another thing is lack of energy, lack of desire, lack of emotion, quick irritability, poor sleep, those type things I kept dealing with. A different range of motion from, again, as I mentioned, rage to anger to impatience. I'm a very patient person, and I found that discussing things would just take too long. Even when I was discussing it, it would take too long. I was trying to hurry up and get through my own conversation. It was just, these were emotions that I just hadn't dealt with before. And because I didn't understand them, I had to, again, end of the road. Do I want to keep doing this, or do I want to change? And I realized I had to change, and only to change, I had to figure out what motivated me to feel like that. And so I had to unpack all of that ugliness in order to develop a plan to get me to a healthy place. But those were a lot of the things that I noticed from the very beginning that let me know that there's something different here. There was a feeling of hopelessness at times, and I've never been hopeless. A feeling like, oh, this is never going to get better. What's the point? Again, going back to my military career, I'm like, what's the point in doing all this? If I don't show up, who cares? That's never been me. And so, again, those are a lot of the things that I saw from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you bring up a good number of points, like these different feelings, and most of it, because you know yourself better than anybody else. And so when you start to notice a change in your behavior, your energy, outputs in life, that's a telltale sign, and you gotta take a moment to step back and listen to yourself. One thing I wanted to talk about is, you said no one noticed, and so 3 things came to mind just from listening to you. And so earlier, you said you had to condition and train yourself how to not deal with trauma, or not show it. Mm-hmm. And so do you feel like, one, is that a good leadership tool?
No.
For you to internalize so that you can get the job done?
No. So a good leadership trait in my mind would be, you mean encouraging my soldiers to do what I did, or being able to do that so I can get the mission done?
Just being able to do that.
I am proud of the sense that I had the capacity to do it, because that means that I'm stronger than the average person. That's my ego speaking right there. Mm-hmm. But the truth be told, resilience, I think it's a good trait to be able to perform in an instant. For example, I have a friend named Nate Self, who was in one of those scenarios in Afghanistan that we used to read about in history books. And after his valor in literal battle, the president's office called my office asking me to get him to the State of the Union. That's how big his situation was. And he had come to my office months before this happened, and we just shot the stuff and, talked about old times, listening to old country music and stuff in C1. That's what we did. And he never mentioned any of that. And so after I got him to the State of the Union and then back, we met up again. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me? And he said, you know something, June? I just didn't view it as that important. And I was just like, no, that was important. We read about that stuff in books. When I read your write-up, and I said, how were you able to do that? And he said, June, he said, when they started coming over the berm, he said, I automatically shut down and all the training took over. And he said, I was able to get my men. We were able to hold down the fort and hold back that battalion of people overnight because I was able to perform in that moment. And so I believe that being able to do that saves lives. I hate to, and I don't want to give you my Jack Nicholson routine, but I believe the ability to do that in the moment of crisis save lives. But I would not encourage people to do that because, again, we as a tendency, I think we as a military group, certain characteristics of us, we actually, I think the majority of us are obsessive to a point. And because we're obsessive to a point, we could take that ability to suffer through momentarily and just exacerbate that through years and years and years of trauma without getting help. And in fact, I believe that's what we do anyway. So no, I don't encourage that. In a moment, you have to do what's best for the team. But as an ongoing mission, I would not say that's a good trait because having the ability to do that is one thing, but you have to have a stronger ability. And that's the ability to get help when you need it. When the crisis is over, to determine what help is needed and get it.
Right. So I agree. It's a time and a place to deal with your feelings and sometimes, to shut them off. And definitely in combat and in mission critical situations, sometimes you do have to flip that switch and get the job done. But just because you flip that switch doesn't mean that, the problem or the issue is gone. And so at some point you do have to come back around and address it.
That's right. That's right.
I appreciate you talking and sharing that. So the other part to this is, should the leadership have noticed that?
Yes. Point blank. Because I would have.
Yeah.
Because I would have. There's no way I would have. Yeah, they should have noticed. Okay. And again, you can't get too busy, especially when you have, because it could have gone, had I been a different type of human being, it could have gone a pretty bad way.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm gonna come back to that point because we're gonna unpack that and talk about it when we talk about how to help someone. And so, from a leadership standpoint, I do want to hit that part. The last point to this that I wanted to ask was, okay, so we go through this complicated grief and sometimes we get stuck. And that feeling of being numb or not caring, I mean, that sets in to the core.
Yes.
I remember my situation, and I pause because, I see it just like it was yesterday. I remember being so hurt about what was going on with me that it was one night. I'm driving home to see the family, and I'm coming from Georgia to North Carolina, and I'm in the city limits, and of course it's a Friday night, and so, everybody is out drinking or, like coming from the club. And here I am at this red light, and a car swerves into the lane and is like dead head on, like ready to hit me.
Right.
And I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I didn't care. Like, I was literally like, come on.
Yep.
And I was just that numb inside that nothing could move me.
Yep.
And what ended up happening was, at the last moment, I guess they gained consciousness or snapped out of it, and they jerked the wheel and ended up running straight into a pole.
Wow.
And so my next question to myself was, Greg, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep driving, or are you going to help them?
Wow. Yes.
I had to ask myself that.
Yes.
And so, like you were saying, the military part kicks in, and I'm like, all right, well, I moved the car so that, because, it's an accident on the road. And so, I moved the car to position so that people can see my hazard lights and, nobody would come hit me. And because it's Fort Bragg, it's a military base, there were other soldiers and stuff around. So instantly I'm calling 911. I'm directing people to move and get the one passenger out the seat. And so I'm helping getting the driver, and it's a young white girl and a young black girl, in the car together. So they get the black girl out, and the white girl, she's stuck. She's between the steering wheel and the seat. And I mean, she's just in there. And so I didn't want to pull her, she was crying a little bit. She wasn't really in it. She was out of it. And I remember two things happening. The guy that was helping me saw the car started to smoke, and he thought he saw sparks. And he was like, man, we should probably move before, the car explode, and just let the police and them, come help her. But nobody there around. And I was like, no. I was like, you can, but I'm a helper. So either you're in it or you're not. And he looked at me, and he looked back at the car, and he was like, shit, he had his own choice to make. It was self-preservation at that point for him. And again, I wasn't afraid, of whatever it was going to be. And I remember the young lady turning her head and looking at me and saying, "It's all your fault." And she goes into a seizure, and she literally, her eyes roll to the back of her head. And, and I tell her, "I'm sorry, baby, I'm sorry." And it's crazy that happened, because I deal with survivor's remorse.
Right.
Emily Perez. That's one of my closest friends. Like, she's there.
Yeah.
And her and Scotty Pace, that was, my roommate. And so, I lost both of them. And I remember telling Emily, especially like when 9/11 happened, we were in class, and I was like, hey, I got you. Like, I'm always be there.
Wow.
For her to go to war and to lose her, I felt so hopeless on the inside.
Yep.
And it wasn't nothing that I could do. And I used to see images of her in the mirror in Scotty, and all I could tell her was, "I'm sorry. I wish I could have done more." And I dealt with that for so long. And now here I am having this young lady who might die, because this accident is pretty bad. And her last words were, "It's your fault." And like you said, I had to accept it. And I was like, "I'm sorry." And so I was committed to getting her out the car, and thank God something happened, something let loose, and, we were able to get her out and, over to like the area for safety. And so ambulance show up, and so did the police, and, they're like, who's the person that called? And I was like, it was me. And I remember talking to the officer, and he's like, I need a statement from you. I was like, can you get it from one of them? Like, I just want to go home.
I understand. And
he looked, and he was so perplexed. He was like, this big accident just happened, and you're the main witness. And I was like, I understood. I was like, I'm a vet. I drove from Georgia. I'm less than 2 miles from my house. I just want to go home and see my kids.
Yeah. Yep. I understand.
And so that brings me to ask you the question of, how do you feel again after being so numb?
I can honestly say I can remember the date it actually changed for me, April 5th. So when you say, how do I feel right now, or how did I come to feel?
How did you come to feel?
It's actually a sermon my pastor did, believe it or not. And he talked about, it was a story about, he wanted to offer this beautiful tree that he bought to God as a token of thanksgiving. And so it was a huge bonsai tree. It wasn't huge, but it was a tree that you could plant, right? And so it was bigger than a dining room table, but it was smaller than, a great oak. And so he was going with the tree, and all of a sudden someone did something and broke one of the significant branches off. And, with bonsai trees, they're fashioned a certain way. And the value of them depends on how well that they're fashioned. And so this is Asian culture. And so he was irritated beyond. The term they used was pissed because this tree was now just ruined, and he paid good money for it. And so he went around for the rest of the morning with an attitude, and he didn't want to talk to anyone, and he was frustrated and X, Y, and Z. But and so when he tried to pray to the Trinity, he realized that no one was talking to him, and he couldn't figure out why. And so when he kept praying and saying, hey, God, I need an answer, eventually, and it took hours, the service happened. He gave a sermon that he really wasn't feeling. He kind of rambled through it, couldn't figure out, why he didn't catch that fire that he normally catches. And he said eventually, over the course of hours, God did answer him. And he said that God said, what do you think I need an offering for? Or what do you think I need thanksgiving for? Or what do you think I need gifts for? Especially the gift of a tree. All the trees are mine. And then he said, he started naming like money. All that's mine. I don't need you to give me that to feel whole. What I need is your attitude to be right. And so the pastor said it all kind of made him feel ashamed all at one point in time. And he said he realized that, God made him feel convicted. And that, he said that the Holy Spirit made him feel inspired and convicted, because he then realized that he is the example of how one should interact. He is a representative of God. And as that representative, he was moody. He had an attitude. He was frustrated. He wasn't compassionate. He didn't give mercy, all because he was trying to give a gift to a being that owned all the gifts. He said he realized how foolish it was for him to be upset because he couldn't give a tree to God when God made trees. And so he realized that, again, why am I acting a fool? At the end of the day, God has blessed me with so much, and what I'm doing is being ungrateful. I need to focus on what I'm grateful for, or focus on the things that I should be grateful for, because, again, I'm coming across like I don't appreciate anything. When these people are looking at me, my sermon didn't bless the congregation. It did quite the opposite. They were confused, and I was frustrated. So if I was frustrated and confused, I know they were frustrated and confused. He said, so I lost an opportunity to bless people that are in my community. I lost an opportunity to do certain things. Me having an attitude was more detrimental than positive. Why? Because I had an idea of what I wanted to do for God, and God has only wanted one thing for me. He wanted my heart, and he wanted that heart to be appreciative of what he's done of what has been done. And so for some reason, that sermon just got next to me, and I began to think and meditate and pray over it. And I realized that I have so much to be grateful for, so much. Going back to all my negative stats, divorced mom, single mom, raised poor in the ghettos of Detroit, Michigan, little Black girl, all these negative stats. And from all of that, I truly own the title of Queen today, because in every way, shape, or form, I am strong. I am an amazing human being. I have amazing gifts, and I didn't get them because, I was just, lucky and gambled. I grew these in myself, and I didn't grow them in myself because I'm so smart and wonderful. I was given certain gifts, and I'm grateful for those gifts. Even the opportunities that have turned out bad for me, and I can name a dozen of them right off the top of my head. I've watched God take those things and turn them around in my life. The 23rd Psalm is a psalm that I truly enjoy because, again, it says, he leadeth me beside the still waters for his name's sake. He prepares the table before me in the presence of my enemies. I cannot tell you how many times I feasted in the presence of my enemies. I can't tell you that because it's an inordinate amount of times. So I realize that I am grateful for all that he's given me. And just because, and this is going to sound bad, just because I lost my mom does not take away everything that he's blessed me with. I'm a West Point graduate. That kid with all those negatives, I'm a West Point graduate. I've got a master's degree. My kids are going to be West Point graduates. All of that are virtual blessings, and I should be appreciative of them. Losing my mom, and then I have to even look at that. Losing my mom. Look at what I had with her when she was alive. Look at the amazing road that I had with her. I knew that there was somebody on the planet that loved me unconditionally, and there was no doubt in my mind. From the moment I opened up my eyes and could understand to the moment that she closed hers. Most people don't get that kind of love in their lifetime. I did. And then I looked at the time. My mom, there was some dengue disease or virus that happened back in the early 2000s. And there were only about 20 Americans that caught it. My mom was one of the Americans. So with COVID going on, I hate to say it, but my mom left our world at an opportune time, because this would have been a disastrous world for her to live in like this. She was a germaphobe, number one. She'd have been miserable living like this. And oh, by the way, my daughter's graduation from West Point, my mom was she had just suffered a stroke maybe 2 years ago. Not maybe, it was 2 years ago. And she was on the trail of learning how to walk again and all those things. But being able to go to West Point and see my daughter's graduation, she wouldn't have been physically able to do that. From her spiritual planet or her spiritual plane, she was able to watch my daughter's graduation and observe it and be with our family in a way that she couldn't have if she were still here. So in those ways, I had to look at going back to my Grateful app, I had to look at what I was actually grateful for and actually be thankful for that. It's no different than when you have children and you buy certain children things on Christmas Day, and one child, because they didn't get exactly what they want, they forget all the other 10 items that you got them that they said they wanted, and they're just pouting about this one. And so I felt convicted like that. And that whole story is actually, that was the day I got better. That's the day that the grief lifted. That's the day that it didn't hurt as bad. I think of my mom. I love my mom. And as you can see, I'm still emotional about her. That'll never change because of the experience that I had with her. But to say that I actually had the pain of grief that I had before, I don't. And the number one gift that I was given was the realization from God that I need to focus on what I'm grateful for as opposed to what I don't have.
Okay. So with this, and now let's talk about support. Do to help yourself.
Pardon me?
I said, let's talk about support. So the first question is, what can you do to help yourself? What can a person do to help themselves?
I think the most powerful thing a person can do is to self-reflect, because no one can help you more than you're willing to help yourself. And in the solution to your healing is in your own head. It really is. But you have to go to some places and look at some things that you may not want to look at. Like, it was shameful for me to look at the fact that I was sitting around resentful of the next person because they had their mom and I didn't. But I didn't realize where my sense of rage came from. I didn't realize where my resentment was building from. I didn't realize that. But I had to be able to look at that, deconstruct it, and own that. And so 100 things happened just like that. To look at self-reflection, I think, was the most powerful thing that I did to help myself. Okay. And so that's what I think most people need to do, so that they can see the problem clearly. Mm-hmm. Because again, it could be a situation like mine where no one else sees it. Okay. And the one person that could see it, the one person that did know and that did literally help me through, was 1,200 miles away.
Gotcha. So self-reflect. Now let's go to the outside looking in.
Okay.
What was, with your situation, what did you want from other people? What kind of support? And from people around you, as well as what did you think, your leadership should do, or what, leaders should do?
So I wanted people to care. That was the number one thing. I wanted my leaders to at least somewhat comprehend what had to be done in order for me to get their mission done. I wanted time. I wanted time that someone would shield me away from the rigors of the day-to-day brutality that I had to go through. I needed someone to do that. And unfortunately, everyone had their own stuff to deal with. And because it didn't happen to them, they didn't get it. I wanted people to, and once I realized that people generally couldn't feel what I was feeling or didn't understand the depths of the loss, I wanted them to leave me alone. And so I wanted to be loved, and I wanted to bring people, I wanted people to bring me close, and I wanted to be able to push them away as well, which is kind of conflicting. But why did I want to push them away? Because some people would say, oh yeah, they would offer every catchphrase and every cliche. They wanted to bond over their loved one's death. And I wasn't really ready for that right now. I wasn't ready to engage in it. I was fragile in my ability to stand strong for a period of time, where if my mind went to my mom, I was there with the quivering lip, and all I wanted to do was focus on something that was not that, because I didn't want to cry in front of anyone. So I wanted to be loved, but since nobody was going to do that because they didn't understand what was going on, I wanted to be left alone. Because, and I hate to say it like this, because what they were offering wasn't good enough. I would say that. And that was probably a judgmental type thing. So I wanted them to understand and care. And another thing I wanted them to do was to empathize and realize what it took. So.
Gotcha. What was the toughest part of your journey?
Dealing with the rage. Dealing with.
When you say dealing with the rage, and it leads into the next topic of how do people make amends. So, of course, you know that old cliche saying, hurt people hurt people?
Yes.
Have you hurt people in your process, and how did you make amends?
So because I didn't have many people in my inner circle, I can count them all on one hand. I had 2 people in my inner circle, my best guy friend and my best girlfriend. So my dad couldn't help because he's 74 years old and he was suffering from the loss of the mother of his children. My twin brother couldn't help me because he, within weeks of that, he underwent some life-threatening illnesses. And so I couldn't rely on him. And so I realized pretty quick that my inner circle, my front row, was very small. It comprised my 2 best friends, male and female, and my children. And then after that, I couldn't rely on my children for that because me being broken would traumatize them. And so I had the one girlfriend who didn't know what to say because I've always been a big sister to her. And then I had my male best friend who knew what to say, but he was 1,200 miles away. And so I didn't have too many people to lean on, but that was my own doing, I guess. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting here thinking, unpacking that in my head right now too. I couldn't have chosen what I had enough, but I would have liked to have a bigger circle of people to depend and lean on. But what would that have meant? I don't know. Okay. I don't know. Did that answer the question? I think I kind of strayed from the question.
So to go back, it's how did you make amends? So hurt people.
Oh, so yes. So I didn't have too many people to hurt because I didn't trust too many people with the information. There are people that have known me for 10, 15 years that still don't know my mom's past. And so because they did not know, my method of dealing with that was distancing myself from a lot of people. So the people that were closest to me, those 2 best friends, I may have snapped a couple of times at my best friend that didn't know what to say, but I had to uphold this image in her mind, this big sister image. And so because of that, I just left it at that because she couldn't deal, just like my kids couldn't deal, she couldn't deal with me not being okay. So with my male best friend, I let it all hang out. And there was one point where he said, I'm here to tell you, he said, you get a pass because of how you're acting, but ooh, ooh. So I know I'm already a lot to deal with, but I can honestly say that I acted out of character with him from time to time, more than I care to remember. Mm-hmm. But he understood me, he understands me, he loves me, and he accepts me. And because of that, I have never had to say I'm sorry for things like that. I do, but it was always like a blank check written off that says, and that's why you have to choose the right person to vent and do all those things with. Otherwise, I made sure that I controlled all the hurt that I put out, that I controlled the hurt. I didn't allow myself to act out of character. I was pretty much playing a role. Yeah. And the role didn't allow me to vent, blow up. If I felt that coming, I just walked away. I didn't engage in that kind of behavior. I just didn't allow myself to be in the forums to do that. So.
No, that's good. And I'm glad you characterized what you needed in the form of having a person that understands, love, and accepts you,
Yes.
allow you to grieve at your own pace
Yes.
and time and still be there. And if they didn't understand that, then they needed to go. So
Yes, very true.
I'm with
And
you. And so for someone that is trying to support, I guess it's almost a double-edged sword. If don't try to push it because you'll end up doing more damage than.
Yes.
And so it is sometimes people just need their space. And if you're not part of that inner circle, it doesn't mean that, something's wrong or that, you're a bad person. It's just everybody opens up to that inner circle, those people that, that they know are true to you. So I appreciate you, you sharing that. What kept you going when you wanted to give up?
A lot of things off the top of my head. I have love in my life, my faith, number one, my job, my family, the love I had in my life. That's what kept me going.
Okay, so love in your life, faith, and family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, what caused you to correct your destructive behaviors?
Developing my plan, finishing my plan development. Because again, at first it was, it was overeating, which again, that was immediate. And then developing my plan, looking at what I wanted to be, that took time. And then back planning that to what I was doing and determining what was useful versus what was not. Once I actually realized that some of the behaviors were destructive as opposed to helping me reach my goals, then I just did the work to stop doing them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I mean, so like you said, you're a high energy person, you're an extrovert. And so I kind of feel like you wouldn't wait until you're playing your darkest hour until, you hit rock bottom to make a change anyway.
All that happened, my darkest moment, my darkest hour happened relatively quickly, within minutes of my mom passing, within a day or so of my mom passing. That was pretty much the darkest hour. So all of that happened after the fact when I realized that I have a lot to do and a lot to get done. And no matter how much despair I have, I've still got to do certain things. So I guess all of that happened within the first 72 hours.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's talk about health. So, of course, you're a leader and everybody looks up to you. Did you go to a professional therapist for any of this? And if so, did their race, gender, or background play a factor?
So yes, I went to a therapist. It was a therapist I had prior to losing my mom, but the stress of the job that I was in, I'd recently gone through a divorce, those type things to help me see what I didn't see before. But it wasn't it wasn't grief counseling or anything like that. It was a continuation of the marriage therapy that we were doing to salvage the marriage, but it didn't work. So I realized, hey, this is actually pretty useful to continue talking. But once I got into the throes of this job that I'm doing right now, I really didn't have any time. And so to be honest, since I lost my mom, I've only been able to see her 3 times. But she's a Black female, just like I am. And so I don't know if it plays a factor, but because I can draw comfort and understanding from anybody who's talking to me, at least as long as they're talking to me and what they're doing is making sense. I'll say that. But I'm sure that there's some comfort level in the fact that she is a Black female. like me, but that wasn't a part of the criteria. She just happened to be that when they selected her for me.
Gotcha. Yeah. And the only reason I asked is because, with this whole thing that I'm doing, I'm looking at cultural sensitive therapy. So if your therapist or mental health professional looks like you or have been through similar experiences and background as you, then the connection will be much deeper and effective, which will in turn make the treatment outcome greater.
I think you're right. Now that I'm thinking about it, the last time we spoke, I almost feel like I need to ask her how she's doing. And I need to, I almost want to, every time when we were doing physical meetings, I would like reach out and give her a hug and, after it was all over. And if it were a male therapist or a male of a different race, I probably wouldn't feel the need to give her a hug. But there's something about her or something about someone from my culture that makes me feel that they get me. Mm-hmm. That they're not like when I actually get upset and I'm trying to explain something and there's fire behind what I'm saying, I don't look and see that look of fear in their eyes because I'm raising my voice or there's that. When I'm actually everything that I was born to be and the full weight of my personality, we'll call it that, comes out as I try to explain something. I don't have to come to and see that they're like, they heard nothing I said. They're too busy wondering if they should be going towards the door and stuff like that, because that's happened from time to time. Not so much with a counselor, but with people I needed to do business with, be it from the children's school or a work thing or a business thing. If I get to a certain level, then they don't get me. And that's been a hindrance. So yeah, I fully agree with that. There is something about your own culture that you subconsciously believe that they identify with you on a certain level.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about getting help as a leader.
Yes.
So the first part of it is you're the person needing the help. As a leader, how should you go about getting help?
Well, from the commander's course to all kinds of leadership courses that we take, we're always taught how to make sure our subordinates are taken care of. I think the number one thing, if you don't know anything, if your leadership isn't helping you, you do what you tell your subordinates to do. And so I would tell my subordinates to look into therapy. I would tell my subordinates to find a pool of people that they can trust and care about. I would tell my people, as a leader, I would give them the tools or make the tools available for them that I have been taught to give them. And then, oh, by the way, not just taught in a formal environment, but taught by virtue of my experience, what's worked for people. After 20 years of being in the military, I'm sorry. I have a couple things going on. I'm going to have to walk with you and charge my phone because it seems as though work is a calling.
I got you. We're almost finished.
Okay. There is a geo level problem that I have that's supposed to be focused on.
Okay. So the next question is around setting the command climate to help soldiers that are dealing with trauma and grief.
I think the number one thing we can do is start out by telling them it's okay. Meaning, don't just wait for trauma to happen in order to, don't just wait for trauma to happen in order to, I'm sorry about that. Don't just wait for trauma to happen in order to come in and let that be a part of your leadership philosophy. That when something happens, that you encourage this. Because if you don't come in telling them what type of leader you are, what type of thing that you stand for, who you are as an individual, if you don't come in doing that, and you wait until someone actually suffers, it's like, sexual harassment. When if the commander comes in and they don't set a tone for racism or sexism or whatever have you, if they don't set a tone, then a lot of times, if they wait for not the inevitable, but when they wait for a traumatic event to happen, if they then begin that they're going to, hey, this is where I stand. No, your company should know, or your unit should know where you stand from the very beginning. So if you set that as a part of your leadership philosophy, that if you are hurt, because again, the stats are simple. Soldiers are committing suicide 22 a day. Those stats haven't changed in a decade. Soldiers are disproportionately suicidal, depressed, anxious. I mean, our stats are off the charts. So that should be a part of who you are as a leader. When you come in, this is what I'm about. I'm not about soldiers fighting through the pain. I'm not about soldiers doing this and doing that. Let that be because that's annual training that comes around. Be a part of that training. Let that be a part of your leadership philosophy that everyone has on the board. And then, oh, by the way, when it comes time to doing a training, you make sure that you are a part of the training so that you can let those soldiers know that you are in support of that, in support of getting the help that you need.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That is awesome. Okay. What advice would you give your younger self?
Advice. I did a lot of standing up for myself. I did a lot of speaking up for myself, but I would tell myself to trust myself, that it's all going to be okay. I would tell myself to love myself more, to be more gentle with myself. I would tell myself to forgive myself a lot more, to be more forgiving quicker. Because as I look back, a lot of the times when I made mistakes and it resulted in trauma, I didn't forgive myself. And because I didn't forgive myself, I didn't forgive myself right away. I punished myself. I was hard on myself. I punished myself worse than anybody else could have punished me. So that was unnecessary. And my younger self would have done well for somebody to tell me, for somebody to see it, and then for somebody to tell me don't do it. And that's what I do for people now.
Do you see your growth? Do you see your growth?
Yes. Tremendously. Yeah, easily. I definitely see a ton of growth from the loss of my mom to present, and from the time I joined the military to present. I see growth in from my first divorce to present. I mean, there's so many different points in my life that have brought about growth and love. They're determined to give me information. They just need 20 minutes of my time, sure. But yes, I definitely see the growth. And not only am I appreciative of it, I'm truly grateful for it, because I'm able to share my story with other people. I love the fact that you're doing this, because it's to help people. And I'm a part of that, a part of helping people. I am proud of the growth that I've made, because again, that's what this journey in life is all about. It's not just a journey through grief, it's a journey through life. And the journey has been amazing. The journey's been amazing because of the growth.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, we're closing. I appreciate you for coming on and sharing. How can we get a hold of you? What are some of the efforts that you're pushing?
Say that last part again.
I said, how can people get a hold of you and like any efforts that you're doing on the side, either nonprofit or volunteering or mentoring?
So there are multiple avenues. The Do More Together is an avenue that I've used. Right now, I used to, I'm not in field force, but you'd have thought that West Point was paying me to recruit. I do mentorship at schools, and then I just volunteer at shelters, things like that. right now, and this is still a product because I'm not exactly where I would want to be when it comes to dealing with the grief of my mom yet. I would say that I'm not quite open for business just yet because I'm still working through things. When I am, I feel it'll be amazing because the full extrovert will be back. But right now, the extrovert can get herself in a lot of trouble taking on more because people, when you're a high energy person, people have a tendency to come in and flood in. And I'm not at the point yet where I can deal with a flood of people right now. Mm-hmm. And so I will say that it's more to follow. I've given people rain checks until August, September, and October because I'm pacing myself. But for right now, I'm doing my job, managing my family, and doing some items with the Do More Together group and trying to get our Rockbound Highland home to understand that there is a racial issue that needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. All right. So that's what I'm doing right now.
There we go. All right. Well, any words of wisdom or encouragement that you want to give before we sign out?
Just life is a beautiful journey. It's an amazing journey. Get excited about it. Wake up with a purpose every day. Wake up focused on what you're grateful for. Wake up with an agenda. Life can be an amazing journey. But the thing is about life is that you have to make it so. A lot of people believe that it's a gamble when they get up in the morning. And if you don't put forth an effort and live on purpose, it's not going to turn out the way you want it to turn out because there's so much working against us. There's so much that could possibly go the wrong way. And if you're not intentional, it will go the wrong way because just like a roll of the dice, we wouldn't drive. Here's my pastor says this, just like you wouldn't get in a car and drive with your eyes closed and your hands off the wheel, just like you wouldn't do that, you shouldn't go through life not being intentional.
Indeed. Look, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. This is June and Greg with Guards Down, telling everyone out there to be safe, stay focused, and stay engaged. Yeah.
You've been listening to Guards Down with Greg Washington. PTSD and complicated grief are very real. About 8 out of every 100 people will have PTSD at some point in their lives. About 20 to 54% of people with complicated grief will simultaneously suffer from major depressive disorder. And that's why shows like this are hugely important. Raising awareness for PTSD and complicated grief. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hook up with us at guardsdown.com. weareiron.org. On Facebook at Guards Down. And find us on YouTube and Instagram.